Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to do some housekeeping announcements. Sorry, I'm a little bit... just going to do a couple of housekeeping announcements before we start. Can I just start off, first and foremost, to say a very warm welcome to you all to this conversation event here today. In terms of your emergency exit, there's an exit obviously out the door that you came in. There's another fire exit over to my left and to your right. And apparently, you go out into the courtyard and then you press a white release button on the right-hand side to open the gate. Let's hope that doesn't happen. In terms of a couple of other things then, just to say there are a number of PCSA staff in attendance here today. So if you do need assistance at any stage over the course of the afternoon, please make yourselves known to them. We are going to have the event live streamed. And there will be a video recording made of the event for availability online afterwards. And also just to ask you to check your mobile phones while you have the opportunity, and if you can put them on to silent mode, please. So the second thing I just wanted to do is just to very quickly go through the running order for the afternoon with you. And as you know, it's a great opportunity for us as the PCSA to get the opportunity to get those of you who are involved in the consultation process back in the room with us here again today, and just to give you a sense of what we've been doing in terms of developing the policing priorities over the last period of time. We're going to start with a welcome from our chairperson, Elaine Byrne, and then Elaine will invite the Minister for Justice, Home and Affairs and Migration to address you. We're going to take about 20 minutes then between myself. I should have introduced myself, I just realised I didn't. Aoife Clabby is my name, and I'm the Director for Strategy, Research and Insights with the PCSA. So between myself and my colleague Mark Nuther, who is a Senior Manager in the same Directorate, we're going to do a whistle-stop tour just to recap on where we were with the policing priorities when we met you to consult with you last year, and to give you a sense of the outcomes of the process and what we've done with all of the feedback that we received. And then we're into the main event, as I like to call it, where, as the name suggests, it is a conversation, and we are going to have a discussion between the Commissioner and our Chief Executive, Helen Hall, in relation to the priorities from the perspectives of both oversight and in terms of their delivery. And that will be hosted by Margaret Tumilty, who is a Director with the PCSA. And then the final, I should say, in terms of that slot, there will be an opportunity for you to take some... Mags will start off with a number of questions, but there will be an opportunity to take questions from the floor. So please do bear that in mind as you're listening to the presentations across the afternoon. And then as a final wrap-up, Margaret is then just going to talk to you a bit about, from our perspective in terms of oversight delivery, how are we going to measure success and what will that look like in terms of our oversight work over the next period of time. And then at the end, I'll also call on our chairperson, Elaine, just if she has any reflections across the event. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Elaine. I know that both the Minister and the Commissioner are on a tight deadline today, so I'll hand over to Elaine. Thank you.
Thanks, Aoife. Aoife opened up by saying a warm welcome to everybody, and I just want to underline that it is indeed very warm here today, and to thank everybody for coming out such busy schedules and such a sweltering day where the temptation is to go to the beach, or and it's a demonstration of the commitment that people in this room have towards policing that we're here today. So it is very much a pleasure to welcome you all here today for the launch of the policing priorities for An Garda Síochána for 2026 to 2028. And today marks an important milestone, not only for the policing community and safety authority, but also for policing oversight and accountability in Ireland. The determination of the policing priorities is one of the authority's key statutory functions, and under the Policing, Security and Community Safety Act, these priorities are not set by An Garda Síochána itself. They are determined independently by the PCSA on behalf of the public and approved by the Minister. And this is an important feature and one as we enter a new world of policing governance that might not be well known outside the walls of this room. But this new policing framework ensures transparency and strengthens accountability and helps maintain public confidence in policing. And as a newly established organisation, the authority moved quickly last year when we were established in 2025 to begin this work. And we recognised from the outset that these priorities would be foundational and they needed to inform An Garda Síochána's strategic plan for 2026 to 2028, and they were also needed to inform the annual service plan for 2026, ensuring that the priorities of communities are reflected in the future direction of policing. And central to our approach was very simple, and that was we wanted to listen. We wanted to hear directly from the people who receive policing services throughout every community in the country, from those who deliver them and from those who study and understand policing through research and practice. So the extent of our engagement in determining these priorities were evident in that in last year almost 4,000 people participated in our public consultation and over 400 serving Garda personnel also participated from every county in Ireland. And also we had a significant number of retired police officers as well. And we engaged with community organisations, representative groups and stakeholders. And we also benefited enormously from the expertise of academics who challenged our thinking and helped us test our assumptions. So I want to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation and gratitude for everyone who took time out to participate in what very much is a new adventure for us all. And people gave generously of their time and they spoke candidly about what's working, about what's not, about where improvements are needed and what communities expect from modern policing. And their insights were very much valuable and have shaped the priorities that we've published today. And one of the challenges in this process was recognising that not everything can be a priority, because as we know, and the Minister had said this earlier, that if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And the service that Commissioner Justin Kelly presides over provides a vast range of services and faces more and more significant demands, not least in 6 days' time when Ireland heads the European presidency. So the role of the authority was to identify those areas where focused attention can make the greatest difference for communities, where improvement is most needed and where meaningful progress can realistically be achieved. And so the result of that was a set of priorities that are ambitious but achievable, focused but comprehensible, grounded in the experiences of both the community and Garda personnel alike. And the three priorities for 2026-2028 are work in partnership to meet community needs, to provide a consistent, supportive and quality service, and finally to enable the front line. And these priorities will provide policing focus over the coming years and shape the authorities' oversight and assessment of An Garda Síochána's performance. It is now my pleasure to welcome the Minister for Justice, Home Affairs and Migration, Jim O'Callaghan, whose support in this new framework of policing governance and oversight has been instrumental in reaching this point. Particularly given the responsibilities his department have, as I outlined earlier, with regard to the European presidency, which kicks off in 6 days' time, and we're exceptionally grateful that he has time to come and see us today, given his very, very busy schedule, and indeed the Commissioner, who no doubt is going to be very busy over the next 6 months. So thank you, Minister, for joining us today, and I invite you now to address this gathering.
Thanks very much, Elaine. I just want to start by saying I'm very pleased to be here today to launch the policing priorities prepared by the PCSA, but the priorities are for An Garda Síochána for the years 2026 to 2028. As Minister for Justice, as Elaine was mentioned, I have many responsibilities. Unquestionably, my most important responsibility is that I am the political person responsible for An Garda Síochána. It is, I suppose, the statutory agency that is most important to the people of Ireland in terms of it's there to protect them and to serve the community and to ensure that we build safe and secure communities. So notwithstanding any European obligations that I may have, I will always be prioritising the importance of events such as this to ensure that the Irish public are safe and have great confidence in An Garda Síochána, which they do. Can I just start by thanking Elaine and all the members of the authority for the excellent work that they do. I know a huge amount of work went into preparing these policing priorities, but isn't the board that's been put together and which I've had the honour of meeting on a number of occasions. I must say I think it is a very complementary board. It's a board that has different skills, and I'm very pleased with the way that the authority is operating. I also want to acknowledge the professionalism and dedication of Helen, who's the CEO of the board, and it's important that that work is consistently done at such a high professional standard. As we know, you have a really vital role in driving continuous improvement in our policing service through inspections, promoting professional policing standards, encouraging collaboration and community engagement. And your work with the Garda Commissioner, I think, is extremely important in outlining what are the service plans and what are the priorities for An Garda Síochána. As Elaine said, it's a heavy responsibility. It shouldn't be me that's setting the priorities for An Garda Síochána. In many respects, it shouldn't be the Gardaí as well, but it should be the public, because we are all there to serve the public, and it's from listening to the public that we will get an indication as to what the priorities should be. I suppose that's the reason why in the legislation that I commenced last year, which was enacted in 2024, that such an important role was given to the PCSA. Can I also just acknowledge the work that's been done by the PCSA in terms of preparing the priorities? That involved, however, engagement with communities, residents associations, as Elaine mentioned, but also with very significant numbers of members of An Garda Síochána. I just want to acknowledge the work that's been done by members of An Garda Síochána in terms of ensuring that their feedback was given to the authority for the purpose of preparing the priorities. We need to listen to Gardaí on the front line in terms of identifying what the public's priorities are, because in many respects, a good guard, a good community guard is a bit like a good local councillor or politician. They're aware of what's happening on the ground, and they will have a good understanding of what's the need of the local community. The PCSA has established 3 core strategic pillars in the priorities. First, the Gardaí should work in partnership to meet community needs. This will involve stabilising frontline regular units, enhancing digital capabilities, and working with local community safety partnerships to tackle systemic issues. Second, the Gardaí should provide a consistent, supportive and high-quality service. This will ensure that vulnerable people receive a consistent response and high-quality engagement. And actively building trust with all our communities is rightly identified as being a particular measure of success. And finally, in terms of the third priority, the Gardaí should enable the front line. This will include a review of the Garda operating model to ensure that it delivers effective services across all divisions and aligns with the community safety model. And I think together these priorities provide a plan that strengthens community engagement while giving our frontline personnel the tools and care they need to succeed. And obviously I have a big responsibility in terms of this as well, ensuring that the Gardaí are well resourced and that you have the technology needed in order to carry out this professional policing on behalf of the public, and that's something I'm committed to doing. I think it's also important to point out that when you look at the legislation from 2024, there was a whole series of statutory provisions put in place to ensure that we did have the voice of local communities heard. And I suppose one of the most important ones were the local community safety partnerships. And 35 of 36 of those community safety partnerships have now been formally established under the Act, and meetings have already taken place. And just as you're aware, I also approved the membership of of the final safety partnership in Limerick on the 9th of June 2026, and that inaugural meeting is scheduled to take place in the coming weeks. And I think those community safety partnerships will very much align with and help to achieve the priorities that have been set out here. You'll recall that that was one of the recommendations in terms of the Commission on the future of policing, and safety partnerships have now been put in place. I think they are more advanced and they'll be a more effective model than the JPCs we all remember. And I think it'll be an opportunity as well for people to recognise that not all of society's problems can be resolved by Garda Síochána. Sometimes when a lot of the issues that you face as a local councillor or a TD may involve people who are breaking the law, but you'll recognise that there needs to be involvement from the HSE or indeed from TUSLA or from other statutory bodies. And that's why it's important that these partnerships combine expertise from around the state sector. Also, obviously, as you'll be aware, there's the Community Safety Fund that was launched, which uses the proceeds of the crime money that CAB seizes. Some of that money then is put back into communities. And it's also, I think, worth pointing out, because a lot of criminal activity and antisocial behaviour is committed by people under 18 years of age. The solution to that, in most instances, is to provide youth diversion programmes. And I'm pleased to say, as of last week, we now have nationwide coverage for youth diversion projects, and they're available throughout the country, and they're something that are very effective. We don't hear much about them because it's generally the children that get into trouble and haven't been diverted that we hear more about. Listen, progress obviously is very much dependent on responsive and effective frontline policing, which I was very pleased to see is a priority. I want to commend the Commissioner for bringing in high visibility policing. It's the most successful policing policy I have seen. The public like it, and we need to listen to the public in terms of what they see as the requirements or what they want to see from the Gardaí. And I commend the Commissioner for that policy, which aligns with indeed what government want and indeed what the PCSA want as well. Obviously, my job is to provide the Commissioner with the resources, obviously to provide them with technological resources such as body cameras. I want every guard to have body cameras, and that's something I'm committed to seeing during my tenure. But also the most important resource that the Gardaí have is the humans, the guards themselves, and indeed the Garda staff. We need to get recruitment up. I'm pleased to tell you that I think recruitment is improving and increasing. 794 new recruits entered the Garda College last year, the highest number since 2018. And now consistently, when the Commissioner and myself are down in Templemore for passing outs, we're getting figures in the region of 195 up to 200, and then 200 coming in the following Monday. So if we can get that up to 5 intakes a year, we'll get to the 1,000 that we need to see coming in. So also there's many other things we're looking in terms of training capacity for the organisation, and I'm conscious there has to be continuing professional development for the Gardaí. I just want to conclude, I mentioned earlier on that the central finding proposed by Kathleen O'Toole in the report on the future of policing was that systems should be strengthened significantly. The Commission identified shortcomings and systemic problems related to structures and a proposed comprehensive and fundamental change. And that change is happening, and what we're seeing here today with the launch of the priorities deserves to be recognised as being part of that change. So I want to thank the PCSA for the work that they've done in putting together these priorities. I also want to acknowledge that, like we all remember 10 years ago, if I was the Minister for Justice 10 years ago, I would have been in a different position in respect of Garda Síochána. There was too much attention on Garda Síochána 10 years ago. That has now been completely transformed, and I want to take this opportunity to commend the Commissioner and the senior management within Garda Síochána, and indeed all the members of Garda Síochána, for doing such an excellent job in terms of doing and being noted to be doing the primary focus, which is serving the people of Ireland and keeping our communities safe and secure. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. So I am going to just flick on a slide here. Great, they work. So what I just want to do for the next 5 or 6 minutes or so before I hand over to Mark is really just to recap, because I'm conscious that for those of you who engaged with the consultation process last year, there were a number of different strands to it. So it's really just to give you a kind of a whistle-stop run-through of what we covered and what we did. So I suppose when we met with you in the various consultation fora last year, what we talked to you about was just that, I suppose the size and the capacity of An Garda Síochána in terms of its personnel with 14,000 members and in and around 4,000 staff, but also in providing, and the challenge of providing a policing service to a population of just under 5.5 million. We also would have talked to you at the time just about that context of change, and I know both Elaine and the Minister would have spoken to you about that in terms of the recommendations coming out of the Commission for the Future of Policing in Ireland, but also just those challenges that An Garda Síochána would have had coming out of the recession, where you would have had stays on recruitment and stays on investment in IT and technology and so forth. So that impact and how that impact rolled forward into the organisation and where it was coming from after 2018 would also have been something that we talked to you about. You then had the wider legislative context. We had the PCSA Act of 2024 that Elaine referred to earlier, and that would have brought about the establishment of the Policing Community Safety Authority, but it also would have introduced a new community safety model. And again, I suppose we're still, as the Minister referred to, with the establishment of the last LCSP in Limerick most recently, we're still in the process of start-up mode in some respects in terms of what that community safety model is going to look like and how all of the different players at local level are going to interact and engage with that. I suppose in terms of ourselves, we would have talked to you about our own establishment on the 2nd of April 2025, and as I said out there, the objective that we have vis-a-vis An Garda Síochána. I suppose in a way, if we reflect on it, we're just over a year into our work and our establishment. So I suppose for us, there's also elements of seeing how are we going about the business of oversight and all that entails, from performance assessment, inspections, outreach and engagement, and so forth. So I suppose in terms of the statutory policing priorities, for us it really was that flagship moment as an organisation. And I suppose, again, the timing on it was important because, as was referred to earlier, we wanted to be in a position to be able to feed into An Garda Síochána's development of its annual service plan and also the development of its strategy statement. So there was a huge mobilisation of getting ourselves out and about and engaging with members of An Garda Síochána and also engaging with the community, which I'll come to in a minute. But I suppose it was a great opportunity for us as an organisation as well to be able to, I suppose, promote the work that we do and what we're hoping to achieve. Context, I'm going to mention context in two places, and this is one of them. In terms of the context for setting policing priorities, we were acutely aware of a number of things. I suppose the first is that significant demand on policing that we all have, and that expectation that we all have in terms of what we expect An Garda Síochána to deliver for us. So I suppose there was that and the associated resource constraints that are there for the organisation. We're also trying to have regard to what the current resources are for the organisation, but crucially as well what the likely future resources are going to be and how that's going to impact in terms of the type of priorities that the PCSA might set for An Garda Síochána. The Minister referred earlier to the demands of the EU presidency, and that is without doubt going to have a significant draw on the resources of the organisation. But there's a really important counterbalance there, and that counterbalance is that expectation of policing service as usual in communities right across the country. And the last thing, I suppose, is just that economic uncertainty. We had different economic uncertainties last year to the economic uncertainties that we're now facing. And I think that, I suppose, will always play in. And against all of that, you're then trying to look at setting priorities that are realistic, but they're also capable of stretch as well. So, a couple of things that I just want to highlight here very quickly. I suppose in terms of the policing priorities, what we talked to you about was what were the critical areas that would require extra focus and attention. We talked about that principle of them being realistic and achievable. But the last one, I suppose, for us, this was a critically important one. It was about drawing on that broad range of experience, both among Garda personnel, but also among members of the community. And I suppose in that regard, we really wanted to try and draw on the frontline experience of members, and as such, I think we went to every division in the country, and we consulted with, I think, in excess of 400 Garda personnel. We held 4 regional events as well in different communities right around the country. And again, it's just trying to get to the heart of what's the lived experience if you're in a community, what's the lived experience if you're working in a Garda station, what are the challenges that present to you. And I suppose the 2 key questions that we had: what should be a priority, and what would success look like? And I remember standing in various rooms around the country saying, if we're to fast forward in 3 years' time and you select something as a priority, what would that look like? So in terms of the consultation overview, I suppose one of the things that I just wanted to highlight is we were conscious of the fact that we wanted people to come in and to talk confidently and sometimes confidentially in a space that was created. So we kind of set out the rule that it is that Chatham House principle, that, you know, what you'll see here are the themes that came out of the consultation process, but we really did want to get the opportunity for people to speak openly and frankly to us about their experience of policing that's delivered, but also their experience of delivering that service. In terms of, I suppose, and you'll see this diagram coming up in a couple of places today. But I suppose in terms of if I start on the left-hand side, in terms of engagement within Garda Síochána, we would have a lot of interaction and engagement with the Commissioner and his senior leadership team. But what we really wanted to do was also to engage with the frontline members, as I've referenced earlier. In terms of the communities, I suppose sometimes it can be hard to get to all communities. Sometimes it can be hard to access and hear from different communities across the country. So what we tried to do was to engage with frontline service providers, be they youth workers, family support workers, migrant organisations, victim services, or older people. So it was really just through those 4 regional events that we held, trying to tap into that experience, but also to tap into the experience of those who have worked and are in the field of research, not just in relation to policing, but also in relation to victim support, human rights, community safety, organised crime, technology and innovation, and to really try and draw on all of those strands to help us to inform ourselves about what the priorities should be about. And I suppose there's our own internal expertise, where, you know, the PCSA is an amalgamation of the previous policing authority and the Garda Síochána inspectorate, and both of those organisations had been around for quite a considerable period of time, so it was trying to draw on that experience as well. And then I suppose the final piece that I just talked to here is just in relation to the context. I know I spoke about context earlier in terms of the setting of the priorities, but also the context in terms of the type of policing service that Garda Síochána operates, and also the type of policing service that I think as a country and as communities we've come to expect, and how that compares with other jurisdictions. So we did quite a bit of work in looking at, are there comparable jurisdictions? Are there also examples of what good looks like in other jurisdictions, and how might that feed into the process? So I'm going to leave up the 5 primary activities, because Mark is going to just go through the detail of the outcomes of the process and how that has led into the development of the priorities themselves. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Can I just say first, and as Aoife says, I'm going to go through the consultation and give you a sense of, well, what did you say to us, and how did we use it, and how did that inform the priorities that Elaine and the Minister and Aoife have spoken about. But I suppose, first of all, just to say a huge thank you for making the time today. Just to echo, I sat in an awful lot of the rooms. I think I did about half the Garda consultations and was at the 4 regional events, and to see the same people in the room here is exactly what we wanted. So again, a thank you, and also to the staff on the team that helped put together today and all those consultation activities. I'm going to concentrate on the first 4 here. The 5th one is desk-based review and research, and this is where we would have looked at other jurisdictions and kind of sense-checked what we had heard in an Irish context against where's international policing at. But the first 4 starts with the online survey, and I'm sure many of you will have engaged with the survey online. We had nearly 4,000 respondents from a mix of members in the public and from Garda personnel. So this ran for about 5 weeks. As you can see on the right-hand side, I suppose this explains it better than anything. We had given participants 70 points to spend. And the idea was to put you all in the shoes of the Commissioner and say, if you were in his office in the morning, where would you prioritise resources? What would you want to see the Garda Síochána working on in terms of their time and effort? So everyone that took part had the option of rating 24 different policing areas of services between 0 and 5 points. And a lot of the feedback we got in the open text was, well, that's not enough points, we're going to need more. And I think that is something that we heard throughout the country, you know. And we had a supplementary survey at the end that the vast majority of people filled out, just asking, it was anonymised, but asking for demographic information. What county are you in? What age are you? Are you living in an urban or rural setting? And that just allowed us to dig a bit deeper into these results and say, okay, well, is there a difference among different communities? Are there certain sections within our communities that have a particular concern about one area of policing or another? We were delighted with the high response rate. We also, I suppose, are aware that in any anonymised survey, it's self-selecting and there can be weaknesses there in terms of being able to draw wider conclusions. So we were aware of that, but we were also quite happy in terms of breakdown of the population across those demographics, that it's actually quite a robust sample. So in terms of our main findings, just to give you a whistle-stop tour to this, and sorry, I should have mentioned at the top, I am speaking essentially through a document that's in your packs. It's the consultation outcomes report. It serves as a support as opposed to the priorities, and it says a lot of what I'm going to say today and a lot more that I can't because of time. So as we said, on the left-hand side to bring you through, we got just under 3,800 responses. The vast majority, 2,900 almost, were from the public, but almost 500 were from people who identified as either current or former Garda personnel, and we were really delighted with that because it allowed us, as I say, to drill down into those responses and then when we went out and met Garda personnel in stations to be able to talk to them about, okay, well, why do you think that this is going a certain way, or why do you think members are prioritising this? We, as I say, were quite happy with the age breakdown. There were, like a lot of online surveys, maybe some slight weaknesses in terms of the size of sample for the 18 to 24-year-olds and the 75 plus in particular, but as I say, it's quite robust in the middle. You see here on the right-hand side, these were the top 10 priorities in terms of the average rating given to them. And really, as you look down through them, you see the sense that people prioritise, and this is in line with other surveys done and the Guard's own public attitude survey results. High harm offences against the individual were something that came out very strongly in this. So 4 of the top 5 are around areas like sexual offences, domestic violence, assault. But we also saw a really strong focus on high visibility and volume crime issues. So bear in mind there's 24 and these are the top 10, and there's 2 really common threads there. More generally outside this, and the document I referred to in your pack has the full list and the average score, but non-core services, or what was described throughout the consultation as non-core services, tended to receive lower scores. This was around areas like victim services, mental health, vetting, and when we looked into the open text responses, it wasn't that people said that these aren't important, it's just that they saw that there were other agencies that maybe could do more, could step in to assist on Garda Síochána with those services. There was a strong consensus within, if you look at the bottom right, the main issues that were raised in the open text responses, and this was at 40% of all participants. There was a really strong consensus about that need for a visible policing presence within communities. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that as I go on over the next 10 minutes or so. But there was a particular reference to community policing and that engagement with the community. And I think it goes back to something that was mentioned earlier about, again, the public have a huge trust and confidence and connection to Garda Síochána, and that came out in those open text responses. These are the words that were used again and again. There was, I suppose, concern and recognition raised around Garda resources and Garda training amongst the members of the public and members of Garda Síochána who responded to this survey. And there was also recognition, as I said, for a need for greater multi-agency working. And in particular, one thing that maybe surprised us a bit was the amount of people that raised the issue of property and environmental crime. And I'll speak more about that as we go on. So, for those of you in the room who are members of our various community stakeholder groups and organisations that engage with us, you will have lived through this. But just for everybody else in the room, we were really conscious, as Aoife said, in terms of leveraging the experience of those that work in the community and work with Garda Síochána on a day-to-day and serve members of the community. So we held 4 regional events. We had in excess of 100 organisations come and meet with us. They were day-long town hall style events, and we ran over a number of sessions around organised and serious crime, high volume crime, community engagement and services and victims and the vulnerable. And as I mentioned, there were a mix of services such as those that work in the domestic, sexual and gender-based violence space, youth workers, reps from kind of farming and business groups. And what came out very, very strongly, and as I say, I'm going to speak at a high level, as Aoife said, we engage in a kind of Chatham House rule piece with this, so we're giving thematic feedback to give you a sense of what was heard and what was said to us. The vast majority of stakeholders across all of the different sessions that we ran spoke about that explicit preference for an enhanced engagement and presence from Garda Síochána to communities. And this was placed, I suppose we placed them in the nearly binary choice at times, going, well, if that meant less resources elsewhere. And we were surprised by the consistency of response, going, yes, absolutely, because that frontline engagement, that community engagement is what gives people confidence to report crime, is what gives people confidence when they turn up to a Garda station, that the person that's there and available to them might be familiar with them and might have a greater understanding of the community. They spoke, I suppose, within that and tangentially to that about victim and community support, and this was particularly around the areas such as drug and drug-related crime, antisocial behaviour, but again, it kept coming back to that kind of community-based or community-rooted policing, in that the more the guards are within that area and understand and have connections with the community, that will help them to support victims and the community. There was a kind of common thread running through across the country about the response to calls for service. And there was a lot of concern raised about the idea that, or the concept that, a 999 call going into a regional centre. And we had good, robust conversations around that within the room. I think, you know, we explained some of the connection on that. But I think overall there was a sense maybe that people didn't quite understand the change or the rationale of the change. And there was a call for maybe some improvements in that space in terms of timeliness and quality, but also particularly that quality of communication around if something is changing and affecting communities, why is it changing? Multi-agency responses came up a lot, again, as I say, in terms of that community level drug crime, antisocial behaviour. There was a huge recognition, as with the survey, that this wasn't just about more guards and more resources. It was about other agencies working through maybe the community safety partnerships or through other long established relationships between the guards and other organisations within the community. In terms of the Garda engagement, and as you see from what I've just said and from these Garda engagements, this allowed us to get under the lid of the online survey. That told us what people wanted to prioritise, but not necessarily how. To Aoife's second question earlier, well, what would success look like? So we travelled around the country. We had 33 engagements with Gardaí. It's both Garda staff and sworn members. And these were, again, I go back to the words that were used earlier by Elaine, the candour, the time, the honesty, and at times robust conversations amongst colleagues, Garda colleagues within the room. There was real debate about, well, what would change and what would need to change and what would need to improve in order to improve the services. And these were roughly 2-hour focus groups. An awful lot of them ran on. People were very happy to talk to us. We mainly met personnel at a Garda and Sergeant rank, but again, there was a broad representation across the different grades, so people working in the business services, people working in roads policing, down to, I suppose, detectives as well that worked in particular areas of crime. And the primary thematic issues that came out of this, and you'll see there's a thankfully quite a common trend between what Gardaí on the ground saw and wanted to see prioritised and what the community wanted. And the primary thematic issues, I suppose, resourcing came up. It was the first thing mentioned every time we spoke, and not necessarily in just an overall sense, but people giving us specific examples of where there were resourcing challenges that they were facing. And a lot of that might have included policing, particularly, training, particularly as policing becomes perhaps more complex as time goes on. The op model came up in every division to some extent or another, and I suppose I'd characterise it as there were a number of issues raised that exposed frustrations or weaknesses But when we drew them back and when we dug into them with people, an awful lot of time it came back to resourcing as well. So these things were heavily interconnected, these first 2 points. And maybe, again, that thing about communication of change and management of change. Mental health came up, and I think we were slightly surprised by the scale of this, to be honest. Mental health came up in every single one of the 33 engagements with Garda members. And a real concern in terms of the scale of challenge that the response to mental health incidents is having. Members spoke to us, they gave us specific examples that obviously we won't quote, but in terms of delays of having other agencies respond, other agencies not having the capacity to take the scale of mental health challenges that are facing. And they spoke about an isolated response to incidents involving extremely vulnerable individuals. There was real concern at first for those individuals, but also members cited a risk for Garda personnel as well. That they did, and people were very interested in seeing how the CAST pilot that's running in Limerick is going. Members showed a real, I suppose, desire to see that in their area, but as I say, mental health came up in every single one of them. Fraud came up quite frequently as well in terms of that changing nature of crime, and again, a scale issue and a sense of something that's evolving quite rapidly and quite quickly. So I'm going to speed up slightly. In terms of academic engagement, and I know there are some people in the room who engaged with us, but very similar to the last session. We ran this one online just because of the spread of people working across the country. But again, the need for multi-agency working and the real potential of multi-agency working came out. People were aware of in other jurisdictions where multi-agency responses had been used to tackle all manner of crimes. And again, we detailed more of this in the document that I've provided you with. In terms of that first contact, and again, you'll remember this came up in terms of the communities and that front desk response. We were struck by a quote that someone gave saying, the front desk could be where an attempt to access justice ends. And that's where you see in the priorities that real need to focus on that resourcing of the regular, the training of the regular at the front line and the response that they provide. So, how did this shape the priorities? How did we use it? We had a huge amount of information. We had over 140 hours of direct engagement with over 600 people. We had data from the consultation. But as I suppose spoke to there were clear trends, there were clear commonalities between the different groups that we engaged with. So we ended up with 3 priorities, and they've been cited earlier: the work in partnership, the consistent, supportive and quality service, and that's not meant to repeat at the bottom. That should read enable the front line. And that's a recognition of enabling the front line and the resourcing, whether it's technology, people, training, that's needed to provide the first 2. And we want to be very specific about what we meant by this. They're quite high level. We have 25 detailed measures of success. They're in your pack. They're available for anyone watching online. The policing priorities document is there. And just to bring you very quickly through 2 and show you how we use this in a very practical sense to develop these measures. The first measure of success here falls under the first priority around working in partnership with community needs, and it's an improved process for receiving, triaging, responding to and resolving calls for service. We heard consistently on the part of Garda members what the term overcorrection was used in terms of 999 calls coming in and perhaps not being appropriately cancelled where it is appropriate to cancel them, and the scale of calls coming in and being relayed out. And as you'll remember, I said that the community groups themselves felt actually there needed to be a focus on that timely response and that appropriate response. So we've put in a very specific measure around that, particularly around that consideration of approach to calls to local stations, ensuring appropriate triage and resolution occurs, and perhaps, and this is with a nod to technology, perhaps there's a room for expansion of online reporting or engagement, if and where appropriate. And the final one, just to give you an example then, and myself and Aoife are both available throughout the rest of the afternoon if you want to come and ask us more detail on any of them. But again, I go, this really, the regular is how I'd sum up the engagements with Garda members when we went out and engaged with them. And that's because of the scale of role that they have, that they respond to all different crime types. They are that front desk. They are the first person that someone might meet, and that's where the community were really conscious as well of, if you know the guards, and I think there was a conflation, I think in a positive way, between the role of a regular unit and a community policing unit. People saw the uniform and they saw the person that they knew, and they didn't necessarily have to be in a dedicated community policing role. They could also be wearing a uniform and part of a regular unit. So that is how that we I suppose built or constructed that second priority that's on your screen. And I've given Aoife 30 seconds, I think, to sum up.
Minus 30 seconds. I'm not going to spend too much more on this. I suppose a couple of things to highlight. Just the extent to which, sorry now, I'm just trying to find, actually forget it. The extent to which the consultation impacted on the final priorities that we set. And I think in a way, you know, there's the policing authority previously would have had a role in setting policing priorities. I genuinely don't think we, at the start of the process, could have anticipated the wealth of information that we got, the extent of the engagement that we got, and the extent to which that engagement fed back into the final priorities, and we're hugely, hugely grateful for that. There's an awful lot of material, as you can imagine, and Mark referred to. There's a huge wealth of material that we've got from across all of the various methods of consultation that we engaged in, and that's material that I think is going to support us at an executive level, but is also going to support our authority in terms of the work that we do to progress the assessment of the priorities, but also in the wider work that we do in assessing the performance of An Garda Síochána. So I think I'm not going to say any more on that. As I said, Mark and myself are around if anybody would like to have a chat with us, or if there's anything that you'd like to talk to us in terms of your experience of going through the consultation process, we'd be really happy to talk to you. So I might just call Margaret, Commissioner Kelly and Helen, our CEO, to come to the top of the room and take a seat, and we will start the conversation. I might just get some microphones as well, if there are. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Brilliant. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Am I on now? Great stuff. How are you all? So my name is Mags Tumilty, and my job for the next while is to get as much chat out of Helen and the Commissioner as I can. So I'm going to ask them a few questions. I'm hoping by the time we get to 2:30, there'll be questions, reflections and observations coming from yourselves. I tend to interrupt. I'm not trying to be rude, but I want to get as much chat out of you as I can. I have to say, and the question is coming from, he'll kill me, from a retired, or an uncle who's a retired guard who made this comment to me, and I'm going to push the to you. The law is there, the statute's very clear, the PCSA determines the priorities for the guards. And I suppose his sense was, what the feck would you know about it? Do you know what I mean? It was a case of, you have a Garda Commissioner with decades of experience, you have a top team, you have guards who are out and about pulling and dragging every day, and now we have this group of non-guards who haven't policed a day in their life, who's going to come in and tell the guards what their priorities should be, and then they become the guards' priorities. Helen, how would you respond to somebody who would say, my uncle, who would say to you, what the feck would you know about it?
Lovely, a nice easy question to start. I knew I shouldn't have agreed to this. Thanks, Mags. I suppose the first thing I'd say is that there's a really important principle for the authority and the 9 members, if you like, and many of whom are here today with us. There's a really important principle in terms of them setting those independent of the Commissioner and his team, and that's the first thing. But the second thing I'd say is I'd push back at your uncle, and I would say actually that those people who were appointed by government, they were appointed for a really good reason. And if you look at the Act, they're not just, you know, random selections.
Oh, I don't agree with him.
They are collectively, if I look at it, they've experience across policing, criminal justice, human rights, service to victims and community safeties. And I think that's really important. And then the last thing I'd probably say to your uncle is policing is so important and it has such power, and that the public needing, I suppose, to know that somebody's watching An Garda Síochána on their behalf in a positive way, and setting priorities is the starting point for that.
Commissioner, you have a lot of people telling you what to do, what policing should be, what it shouldn't be. I would imagine there must be some in your organisation who would have a similar view to my uncle. How do you take now the priorities and galvanise an organisation behind what they might see as outsiders telling them how to do the day job?
Yeah, well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for the invitation this afternoon. And I don't know, Helen, your uncle sounds like a very wise man to me, but, Margaret's uncle, but
Mind you, I have an uncle who would say the same.
probably similar views, yeah. And look, we've all heard those type of views before, and look, seriously, I think from my point of view as the Garda Commissioner, obviously we, for many decades, we would look inside our organisation, look to see what we think should be prioritised. However, I mean, the reality of the modern world is you cannot be insular anymore. It's really, really important that the PCSA is in place. And I mean, what we've seen already and the introduction about all the work that's been done, I mean, to go out to that amount of people, external people from Garda Síochána, I think that's really, really important for us to get those views. And then the other part that I thought is important, maybe didn't get enough attention, is the members of Garda Síochána, both retired and serving, who were interviewed. And why that's important to me is, obviously, if we go to members of Garda Síochána and we speak to them, we'll get, obviously, a certain view on things. But it's really important that, you know, we get all views from our own people. So again, that's really, really important to me. And I mean, the other thing is, of course, I mean, I've many years of Garda policing experience, as all our senior team has. But I mean, I would certainly, I would never say we know everything, absolutely not. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're supposed to be serving the communities. So to hear what the communities want is really important to us. And that's why I was very struck by what the Minister said earlier around the local community safety partnerships and how important they're going to be. So look, I think for me, certainly would disagree with your uncle.
Yeah.
Look, like I say, I think for us it's a fantastic piece of work, and we can only benefit by it. For me, I don't see any disadvantages in it whatsoever.
Were you surprised by any part of the priorities of the outcomes that came out of it, and especially around some of the things that your own members said?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's interesting. When I took up as the Commissioner on the 1st of September, I set out a number of things that I was quite interested in moving on. And actually, when you see the list up there, two of the ones that I had actually put in at the top of the ones that I wanted to move on are actually reflected in the priorities. So we see right at the very top is sexual crime, assaults, and public order and disorder. And the Minister spoke about it earlier around high visibility policing. So that again is a priority for me, and that has affected assaults and public order. Homicide is obviously in there. I mean, homicide, the investigations that we undertake, I think, you know, the standard of them that we have nowadays are absolutely outstanding. But so I think for me, it was comforting actually to see some of the things that I was interested in, our organisation are interested in, were reflected in the research. So I thought that was very interesting. And then when we look at the actual priority policing areas, so the 25 obviously, and down to that 10, I think one thing certainly struck me was around roads policing. So roads policing, as you can see, didn't make it anywhere near there. It was actually quite low down. So again, I was quite surprised about that, particularly the amount of attention it gets in the media from politicians, obviously from victims, things like the Crow Report, all these type of things going on around roads policing, traffic enforcement. So that certainly I was surprised about that. And then going back to, I think, your specific thing around members of Garda Síochána, I think, look, I was somewhat happy in that a lot of the things that were mentioned, there was very few, if any, things that we hadn't heard before. So I was comforted by that, but and I think that sort of supports our own look into our own organisation, and our own understanding of it, I think, was reflected in the plan, in the report.
I know in the presentation, Mark and Aoife talked about the fact that context was taken into account and all of these things. But 6 days' time, there's the EU presidency. How realistic, Helen, is it to hand priorities like this over to a police service that is arguably under-resourced, but also facing into an EU presidency? And then I suppose after that, I'd ask you, Commissioner, essentially, can the priorities progress at the same time as when the organisation is under this type of pressure? So Helen, first of all, how real is it to expect this? And are you building expectations of the people in this room who you ask questions of, and now you've said their priorities? Has it falsely built expectations?
Well, I think there's always a risk of that, but I think in setting the priorities, the authorities certainly were cognizant of the next 6 months. And you can see that actually in the establishment of the priorities. The other thing I would say is, I mean, the legislation allows us to set priorities every single year and in fact reconsider them, but the authority took a very specific decision to actually run them across 3 years. So it is 2026 to 2028. So my own view is that they are stretching. So I'm not naive that you know, but I think they're realistic. I think there's a number of them that despite the presidency, if they can get embedded in the way of working, like that first touch stuff, like the service calls and all of those things, there is actually quite a lot of progress that can be made. That being said, I think, I mean, it's obviously the authority's role to hold the Commissioner and his team to account for these priorities. I think there will be an understanding, would be my view of it, that this is across 3 years. And you often hear me say, even myself, in terms of our own planning, I don't see necessarily having a red on something as always being negative. It is about stretching yourself to say, well, actually that couldn't happen and it's more appropriate that it'll happen next year. And I hope the Commissioner has already experienced that kind of realism to the approach that the authority takes to its oversight.
Commissioner, EU presidency and progressing the priorities at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So look, obviously the EU presidency for us, and I know this, we've said this quite a lot in the last few months, this is going to be the biggest policing operation in the history of the state. But having said that, I mean, we have to keep the lights on in regular policing. So like the priorities obviously informed our strategic plan. Our strategic plan runs for 3 years, 26 to 28. So, I mean, for me, the priorities, our strategic plan, I mean, it goes beyond EU presidency. But a lot of the things that's in the plan, in the research, in what we want to do, I mean, we can't set them aside for EU presidency. Like, so, I mean, there's a lot of work we're still going to be doing. Say, for example, and I know the Minister referenced it earlier, body-worn cameras. So even though that's a huge project for us, big organisational project, we're still going to continue to that roll out while the EU presidency is on. There's certain things that we have obviously had to put back. And I must say, in fairness to the authority, I think they've taken a very sensible approach towards some of the things for us around the presidency. So we've certainly explained where our pinch points are, particularly around timings and things. So I think there's been a good, sensible approach towards it.
What happens, Helen, if you've mentioned about, you know, the authority holds the Garda Commissioner to account. The public and the people in this room, to an extent, can hold the PCSA to account, and that we've made commitments, we've set priorities, you've said what you needed and wanted, we've passed that on to the guards. What happens if there are those reds? What teeth does oversight have in a situation where in the 3 years they're not achieved?
Well, I think, like, the reality of the way policing is set up is that the person responsible for running the service is the Commissioner. So that's the first principle. So the job of the authority, and it only has one job, is to hold the organisation to account for implementing the priorities, which are national priorities. They're not ours. They're actually priorities for the Commissioner and his team. So I suppose that's the first point. It's about being careful not to get into the weeds of the Commissioner's job. That being said, I think, yeah, there's always questions. Even in the previous act, there was questions about, you know, is this weak? Is it toothless? The so what? The reality is actually the act of watching that oversight happening. I think it's like the previous Commissioner, he used to have a word, and you'll have heard him, Commissioner, steel sharpens steel. And it is that notion of that interaction. It's like us all, human nature. If I know I'm going in, it's a bit like today, I was rereading the priorities because I know you're going to be asking me questions. Our performance naturally as humans comes up when somebody else is holding us to account. And so I think that's the important bit. I think the other thing is that public nature of the oversight, that they're set in public, we've interacted, that's important. I think there has to be a realism for the public though as well when there are reds, because there will be reds, there will be things that will not get done, but usually one would hope for very good reason, because you can set priorities, but the reality of policing, as the Commissioner will know much better than I would, is things change constantly. Like something you might have decided to do this morning, something could happen at 4 o'clock, which changed the entire thing. So I think if the authority and the public are not receptive to that notion of the agility of that need for it, I think that's the thing. I think we have a job as an authority, though, to help to explain that. And I think that's a really important role for the public. It's about saying when there is, it's a bit like our assessment of performance that we publish. We say something maybe perhaps didn't happen, but we say there was a very good reason. Now, if there isn't a very good reason, we might get a little bit crosser about that and talk about it. And I think it's that process that's really important, so people hear and understand it.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago, Commissioner, about you think the authority have been quite understanding in terms of, you know, where the pinch points are and how you've explained it. We're 10 years, and to get away just from the number of years, how mature is the oversight relationship, would you say, between the Guards and the PCSA and that notion of oversight?
Yeah, well, look, I think I've certainly seen it evolve in that period of time. And for me, I mean, the way I personally look at it is I see no value in it being extremely attritional. I see no value in that at all. However, I mean, on Garda Síochána and I as the Commissioner, I mean, we have to be held to account. And I think the way it's evolved now is the authority and the authority members, they certainly hold our feet to the fire on a whole variety of issues. And I mean, in my view, again, they've certainly shone a light on some things that, to be quite frank, I mean, we had missed out on. And I mean, and I'll just give a very even recent example of this. We were down in Cork at a recent public meeting, and there was issue around domestic violence in a particular area of the country, and that was raised to us down at that meeting. And again, to be very frank about it, I was quite disappointed that we hadn't uncovered this ourselves. But again, that's the job of the authority to do. So look, as Helen says, I mean, sometimes there are cross conversations, there are difficult conversations, but look, my view, governance and accountability from Garda Síochána, we obviously have a whole mechanism around that. We've got audit, we've professional standards, we've governance accountability section and everything. But the external oversight is so important, because it certainly, and Drew is absolutely right about that, it certainly sharpens you up, because if you know you're going down to PCSA authority meetings, you've got to know your stuff. I mean, it's not, just in case anybody thinks it is, and I'm sure they don't, it's not, certainly not an easy pass for us. Those meetings are like and just again, to give you an idea how it works for us, we meet every month. Before those meetings, all our senior team gather together. We obviously go through the agenda, we work out where we are. So, like I say, and when it comes to the meeting itself, it's myself and a number of the senior leadership team are there. So, I mean, while it is tough on our time, it's really important, and I think it just shows the importance that we see in the oversight of the authority. So, look, that's my view of how it's changed. Like, I definitely think, you know, okay, it shouldn't be comfortable for us, of course, because it's oversight, but it shouldn't be attritional. I mean, there's no, and like, again, I'm glad to see the way it's developed. I mean, it's not point scoring, it's not political, it's not, you know, people trying to embarrass us or anything like that. It's certainly not like that. So I think it's very professional and very well done. So, but like I say, I think my key thing I'd like to say is it can be challenging for Garda Síochána. So I'd certainly just like to get that across.
I'm conscious that I want to have your questions ready now, because I'm going to stand up in about a minute or two, but I'm going to ask a question I'm mad to ask. When I'm away in different places, like if I think of Scotland, in Scotland they have it in statute that policing has even a role in the reduction of poverty. And then you look at Sweden, and Sweden are saying, we're pulling right back, we just enforce the law. What is policing in Ireland in 2026? Where are ye Where are we as a country along that spectrum?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question. I think for us here in Ireland, the way we police is quite unique, and obviously I've travelled to lots of different jurisdictions. So first of all, the community-based ethos is so important to us. It's really, really important, and it's not just actually in when people are working. Actually, many members of An Garda Síochána, they're really involved in their communities, really involved. So everyone knows who the Guard is. They're involved in different clubs. They're involved in all types of things. So An Garda Síochána is really deeply embedded in communities. I think that's one distinction for us. However, one of the big challenges for us now is how we manage that with the complexities of policing in 2026. So again, we saw fuel protests, we've seen public disorder, we've seen lots of threats from agitators, both far left, far right. So how do we deal with that sharper end of policing and maintain our community policing ethos? So for me, that's a real challenge. And I mean, we've discussed this quite a lot at senior leadership team meetings. And even yesterday, we discussed it. I met all the chief superintendents in the country yesterday down in Templemore. And that was one of the things that we certainly did discuss, how we do that. So,
but I'm thinking, Commissioner, if I was going into Templemore now as a guard and I thought I'm going in to train to catch baddies and that's what I'm going to be doing, but then I turn up on my station in Ballymahon and arguably in a week 60% of my time could be spent dealing with people going through mental health crisis, dealing with children who I've removed under Section 12. I suppose, where does policing stop? Have you consciously got into this situation, or has it just happened that ye have responsibility for all of this non-criminal activity?
Yeah, so you'll often hear this expression like the Guards is the sort of service of last resort, because 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 769 stations altogether, there's Guards available. So really, when something happens and people can't find a safe haven or can't find somewhere to get help, they often turn to the Guards. And you're absolutely right, sometimes they're not policing activities. And when we look what they've done in other countries, so for example, the Metropolitan Police in London, they've moved completely away from dealing with mental health. Would I advocate that? I don't think doing something like that would be the right thing to do in Ireland. And I'm not saying Sir Mark Rowley's decision, that's obviously a decision he made for London, but I don't think that's what the public want from us, because for sure, I think when people are in trouble, whatever it is, they certainly expect the Guards to go above and beyond policing sometimes. Now, the only problem with saying that is it's easy to say that, but when it starts to affect the service that we provide is the problem. So one of the things that I've done, and I know I've spoken to the authority about this, is removing non-core activities. So there is a significant list of activities that we feel in An Garda Síochána that we should not be doing, and we're trying to move away from that. That will free us up some of our time. So there's many examples, but I'll just give one example that we're having discussions around. So at the moment in the district court, Guards present cases, so the sergeants, so we have several hundred sergeants around the country, and they present cases in court. So it's really a legal, quasi-legal type role they're doing. So again, this is several hundred people that could be out working front line. So that's just one example of many. So I think rather than me as the Commissioner saying we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that, I think we need to withdraw from some non-core things. But I think things like childcare, say Section 12 things, mental health, I think because, look, and it's no secret, some of our services maybe they have weaknesses, our other partner agencies. So sometimes we certainly do step in there. And do I see that as something we would absolutely cut? I don't think the Irish public would want us to do that.
Helen, you're on the steering committee for the National Community Safety, that whole area. How do you see that maybe addressing some of the load that the Guards are carrying?
Yeah, I think first of all it's in its infancy. I think the Minister mentioned it yesterday. For those who wouldn't be aware, the local community safety partnerships are being established, 36 of them, and the committee that Margaret refers to is the National Steering Committee, of which I'm a member, and one of the assistant commissioners in the commissioners' team is also a member. I think that could be quite influential if it focuses on particularly key strategic resource issues where we could pick a few things that we could try and make a difference in that multi-agency piece. Some of that actually, even in the initial phase, is making sure that particularly the agencies, that's what we're already hearing from local community safety partnerships, encouraging from that committee or that steering group that the right people are on the committees in each of the local community safety partnerships, because the guards are certainly playing their part in ensuring they've got superintendents on each one. It's quite a senior level attending them. We need those from the other services as well, so that there's decision makers at a local level, because you can't mandate everything from a national level. I don't think that's necessarily going to help, but I think that committee could serve then to ask questions and say, well, why is that not working, and to push agency-wise then to try and influence that.
I'm expecting an avalanche of questions. So, is there anyone that would like to make an observation or a reflection on what you've heard? Good man.
Commissioner, thank you very much for coming, but there was a comment there about the regular unit, and I was the superintendent on the pilot programme, but I would say that you need a dedicated community policing unit. The regular unit is pulled and dragged all over the place, and to expect them to work closely with the interagency bodies that's there, meeting the community and giving the community the time that they need. I don't think the regular unit can do that, because they could get a call to go anywhere. They mightn't be able to turn up on time, spend the time, because people just want to see the guards. They want to talk to them. They want to see them out in the street. Just in relation to the op model, so I was in Longford. Longford is in a division with 2 other counties. For the community partnership to get the vigour that it needs, all the agencies, the headquarters for the other agencies, are actually based in Westmeath. So we're in counties where we have absolutely no connection, whereas, health, education, local government, courts, they're all based headquarters in Meath. So for Longford, I think for the community partnership, to give it that, the strength it needs, maybe just look at that and see what you can do in relation to that. And then just a third thing, and I'm finished, but we're doing our focus groups and we've gone around meeting the people, and it hasn't been, it's not on the priorities, but I do see a lot of racism, and I didn't think it existed to the level that it did as a guard. And maybe people are more open with me now and talking, but I honestly just think if that group got a charismatic leader, we'd be in trouble here. Okay.
Thanks a million. Can I just, I suppose, to come to you then, Commissioner, based on that, I know in the priorities, that idea of baseline and the regular came through strong in what we heard, and I know that's in there now. The other thing then, I know the review of the op model and an expectation that there will be a review of the op model is also there. Do you want to comment at all about that, those as challenges within the priorities?
Yeah, sure. And good afternoon, Seamus, and congratulations on your retirement. So, look, I think maybe I'll take them in order. So I think the first thing, the regular. So the regular for me should be the foundation stone of everything. So we need to have the regular strong, and then everything comes on top of that. So that's number one thing. Community policing, you're right. Look, people, they are dragged from one thing to another. And one of the things, and I've certainly explained at some of the authority meetings, is the way our numbers are, sometimes community policing fill in for regular units. You will know this. So that obviously not ideal. Now, one of the things, obviously, that is going to help us is our recruitment at the moment. So as you heard earlier, the Minister talking about, we're going to head up to, hopefully, to get to 1,000 a year. The government have funded us for 5,000. So with those extra numbers coming in, we're certainly going to be able to move in those 2 directions for the regular and community policing. And the racism observations that you've made, look, really, really worrying for us, really concerning. We only saw here in Dublin City an attack. It was publicised during the week, a lady wearing a hijab. So, I mean, some of the things that are going on from our point of view are really concerning. And then the other aspect of all that is, of course, online we have agitators who are actually making things a lot worse. Some of them, again, well publicised or even from outside the jurisdiction. So, look, your points around that are really well made around the racism. Don't disagree with that. And what I would say is, from our point of view, I really encourage people to come forward if they're victims of that, if it's anti-Semitic, if it's racism, whatever it is, they need to come forward and report it to us, because I've recently interacted with one particular community and they went through a litany of things that had happened to that community. And I said, look, I wasn't aware of some of these things, and it became transparent then they hadn't reported them. So I'd really ask members of the community, even if there's any of them watching online, they have to report them to us so we can get an idea of how bad the problem is. But thanks for your questions.
One of the other priorities that we've there, your predecessor made a comment in public once at one of our meetings, and he talked about, insofar as the Guards are a large organisation drawn from society, it would be foolish to think that they also, as members of that society, don't share the same biases or ills, you know, as the same kind of proportion, I suppose, that you would expect to find among Irish people. In the priorities, there is an explicit reference to travellers, and we talk about first touch, and I suppose often we think of that in terms of victims of domestic abuse or sexual assault, but there's also the first touch for people who are calling on that service. And I suppose travellers have been named and pulled out explicitly because of the experience of oversight over the last decade in terms of where their relationship is at with An Garda Síochána. Has there been any consideration given as yet to how your organisation might explicitly tackle that relationship that's there with the traveller community?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And again, I suppose, look, my comments around the early ones around racism was obviously I was talking about the community in general, not on Garda Síochána, but I do agree with Margaret. Of course, there may be people in our organisation who don't behave as they should do, and who hold views that are contrary to what they should be. But I would certainly say that my approach to that, and actually my predecessors, was we're not going to tolerate any of that. So if any reports of any of that come to light, we certainly ensure that they're investigated absolutely fully. And the particular community that you've spoken about there, Margaret, the traveller community, the exact same for those. So again, members of the travelling community don't feel that they've been treated right. They need to come forward. They come forward to us or to FISRU, the Policing Complaints Authority, and they need to make complaints about it so we know about it. We've obviously, through our community relations section, we have done outreach, significant amounts of outreach and work with the travelling community. Having said that, I mean, I wouldn't be honest to sit up here and say, okay, we've always had the relationship with the traveller community that we should have. But I certainly think things are improving. I certainly do. And I even reflect back when I joined An Garda Síochána 34 years ago, and even how travellers were referred to back then as to how they are now. It's just miles and poles apart. So I mean, that's definitely, for me, positive evolution around how we deal with the traveller community. It's just one aspect, obviously.
Okay. Anyone else? Yourself?
I have a question for both of you. Thank you. We have finished our public consultation quite recently, and on this Thursday, funnily enough, our members are getting together to consider actions and priorities. And top of the list, no surprise, was more visible Gardaí. The question to both of you, because after that was antisocial behaviour and then illicit drug use, similar to your priorities in your survey. So what advice would you give as Commissioner to the members on Thursday when they're going to consider action and priorities from both yourself and from yourself, Helen? Thank you.
I mean, I can start. I think the first thing I would say is try and keep your priorities small. Don't have too many. We were quite deliberate with 3 priorities and then the other 7 kind of subcategories. I think try and reflect on the change thing. I think either Aoife or Mark mentioned it earlier on. You know, where would you like this to move to in the next year, whatever your timeline is, and try and actually say that. That's challenging, is saying, what do you want, how do you want it to be different? And then look at who you can engage with, because you've got all the people around the table who might be able to make a difference in it. So I know with, I think it was the Longford Community Safety Partnership, they kind of had very specific actions, and then making it your job then to hold each other to account to make sure they happen. So there's a couple of things, I suppose, but don't have too many priorities or too many actions, or you'll be tied up in the bureaucracy of trying to actually even manage them and report on them.
So look, I think when it comes to visibility, what I'd say to you is this is probably one of the biggest problems that I have as Garda Commissioner, is where to assign people to, because everybody wants to see more guards, everybody. So every town, every city wants to see them. Now, we have started this high visibility beats program, and the Minister referred to it earlier. And I certainly agree with his comments that it's been really successful. But the problem, of course, as I said, everybody wants it. Now, we have a program of rolling it out around the country. So I would certainly say where you are, it will be coming. So I would just maybe, I would say, I know it can be difficult, but to be patient, because we obviously don't have the numbers, and it's very heavy on numbers, and I'll explain to you why. So if we pick, say, a particular beat area, so say a particular area of Wexford, and we want to put a guard there all the time, that takes 2 guards. You need 1 guard, and then you need a second guard for when there are breaks or going to court or whatever it is. And like some of the ones that we've done in Dublin, to put that in place, it takes 50 guards. So that's 50 guards, and you will have seen maybe at some of the graduations, you'll see they call out where they go to. And one of the more recent ones, we were doing Dearmore East and Dearmore South, and all the list of stations. And when they're read out, you hear Rathmines, 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 you know, Blackrock, Blackrock. And I'm sure people were wondering, you know, we've 6 going to Blackrock and Dundrum, we've no one come to Wexford. But that's why we're doing it. It takes a big surge of people at one time into one area. But we certainly have plans to go everywhere, but it's just how long it's going to take us to do. So every intake into the college, as the Commissioner said, there's roughly 200 coming out the other side, and that gives us the ability to pick a particular area and go to it. So we will certainly be doing that. And what I would say is, obviously there's a member of Garda Síochána on your own partnership. It's really important. We obviously have our own metrics of how we pick the areas and the streets and the beats. We have a whole series of ways of doing that, looking at footfall, looking at crime. But it's really important that you input into that. So you should really be getting ready now, because like I say, it is definitely coming to you. So you, like, what I would say is, rather than I wouldn't like to say wasting your time, but rather than utilize your time now going, we need this, we need this, we need this, you'd be better off using your time to say, this is where we want it when it comes. It is going to come to you. So you should be saying, this is the street we want it on. These are the times we want it on. This is the view of the community, because we'll obviously have the Garda view based on our own metrics, but I think if you give the input, it'll be really, really useful for us. Okay.
Yourself? Hi, my name's Louise Rooney. I'm from Mental Health Reform. Just thinking about the front line, and obviously, you know, policing is reactive. Like you said, you're kind of the de facto first responders who show up in crisis, and that is so needed. But I wonder, you know, there's a lot on the guards' shoulders to kind of, it's this kind of just deserts, this reactive aspect to it. And when we think culturally about where we're at, we have disenfranchised youth, large groups of young males who, you know, are idle and able to show up and protest and wreak havoc. We've got high levels of social isolation, higher levels of mental health. And of course, all of those social determinants play into and are risk factors for criminality and antisocial behaviour. And I just wondered, how is it moving forward, because the Garda response and having more officers is one aspect of addressing that. How do you see moving forward in the next couple of years to advocating for, you know, it can't just be more officers, it has to be more money, more early intervention. Let's look at the social harm that's happening in our communities. And I don't need to tell you that because you know that better than anybody else. But I think it's, you know, sometimes it gets lost, this populist kind of penal populist kind of pressure that, you know, we need more guards, but we also need more interventions too. And just wondered what you thought about that moving forward.
Yeah, again, thanks for the question. So look, I don't disagree with anything you've said there. And I have certainly said it, I think at authority meetings, I've certainly said it to the Minister. There's certain things that we, as a policing service, we can't arrest our way out of them. Certainly can't do that. And particularly around youth. And you know, there's a whole range of issues why some of these young men, and it's predominantly young men, behave the way they do. Many of those issues outside of my control as the Garda Commissioner, or outside the control of policing. However, our responsibility is to make sure that we have enough people there who are visible, as I spoke about earlier, to try and deter some of the activity, that we're responsive, that we get there, we do a good job when we get there, and then that we're accountable. And this is all part of that accountability mechanism. But like I say, I don't disagree with you. Like even with more and more guards, it's not going to solve some of them problems. So there's a whole range of societal issues behind some of these things. But like I say, the way I look at it, we're certainly trying to be more progressive around our training, our understanding of the problems, our interaction with other stakeholders. However, as the Commissioner, I think the primary thing that I have to do is to protect the communities, to make people feel safe in their own communities or even the city centres where they go. So that's how I see the priority for me. But like I said at the start, I certainly don't disagree with anything you've said there.
I think if I may, Margaret, just to comment as well, I think the new act that came in last year, the Policing and Community Safety Authority was created, but it created a structure, if you talk about like even in Wexford that was mentioned there. The real importance or the opportunity for all of us here is not to be looking at the Commissioner to solve these things. It is at and at the National Steering Group, yes, we can influence. On those you have the Department of Education, Department of Health, you've got TUSLA, you've got a wide range of youth services, and that in a way should be mirrored in your local community safety partnerships. So I suppose together, if I was going back to those priorities that you spoke of, it is about, this shouldn't be about policing. This should be about the police playing their part in community safety. Some of that will be prevention and will be exactly like the Commissioner's described, and having that visibility to prevent crimes or to divert or to assist when you're the service of last resort. But I think there's a real opportunity for us as a country to really change and do something very innovative here, is to press each other to work together for that community safety. And some of that is about investment, but some of it's about diversion of resources as well, to say, well, actually we should be, if we think back to COVID and you think of youth services closing down practically and some of that, but the impact we're feeling that now on certain young people now in terms of their mental health and all of that sort of stuff. So I do think that and we're at the absolute edge of the infancy of this, and everyone here in the room has a part to play in that. So I do think it isn't just, I think we have to kind of get out of, I hope anyway, my ambition for it all is that it's not the policing and community safety partnerships, or the local community safety partnerships I should say, are not about bringing the supers in to account for policing. They are about all of the agencies there, and one of the things I've said before to the Commissioner and his team is step back a little bit actually and play your part, but it's not centrally about trying to police our way out of this.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Otherwise I'll move to a last. Oh, go on. Good man. 2.
Hi, Commissioner. Michael O'Callaghan from UCD. Just yourself and the Minister mentioned introducing new technologies within Garda Síochána. body cams being one. And recently, Assistant Commissioner Willis spoke at a government committee on the use of AI within AGS. And I'm just wondering, with the more recent geopolitical presence and the EU moving away from using technologies from outside the Union, is there a focus within AGS at looking at technologies or redirecting your look at technologies that you're using? And are you thinking about working more with academia to introduce these new technologies in the future?
Yeah, so I think to directly answer your question, yes, absolutely. I think one of the things, and Garda Síochána, maybe one of the things that we have been weak at is collaborating with academia, and actually, and even beyond that, collaborating with wider business communities. I mean, we have been weak on that, and one of the reasons we are on that is I think there was always a reluctance around independence, trust, and lots of different things. But I mean, the reality of some of the things that you've spoken about, I mean, AI, drones, or whatever this real complex new technology, sometimes we just don't have the ability ourselves in some of these areas. So we certainly, I've already had a number of discussions around with some of my senior managers around academia and around expanding what we're doing. So I think, like I said, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Hi.
The lady behind.
Thank you. And mine is kind of technology related too. My name is Shirley Scott from Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, and I suppose it's in relation to how technology is impacting sexual crimes and how they're committed, and also I suppose the scale and speed at which they harm victims. And I'm just wondering, Commissioner, what do you see as the greatest challenge technology is posing for the investigation of sexual crimes, and how are An Garda Síochána, I suppose, being able to kind of meet those challenges? Thanks.
Thanks. So I think the technology has multifaceted threats for us. I suppose the very first and the most basic thing is the use of devices, and even for us examining them now, just the scale and the sizes of them. I mean, you all know this. I mean, the phone now, I mean, it has what a desktop computer had a number of years ago. So just that sort of capacity. Things like encryption, and we see more and more of that, people trying to thwart our investigative efforts. So particularly when it comes to something like child exploitation, it's becoming more difficult for us to identify perpetrators in some of those areas by their use of technology. So that's definitely one thing. Then I think, and it's somewhat related to the previous question around AI, definitely just the scale and the ability, what perpetrators can do now, the amount of harm they can do. And I mean, we've seen lots of this already. We've seen young people and what they can do in their own bedrooms, and the ability they have to harass, to bully, around coercive control, all sorts of things that they can actually do remotely now that previously you couldn't do. Obviously, again, just going back to child exploitation, similarly, I mean, you've got perpetrators now, they're in one country and they can exploit young kids all over the world. And again, using lots of technology to try and thwart us in identifying them, prosecuting them. And then for us, even investigating those cases can be hugely complex, and the technology, trying to get it into a format that you can explain to a judge, explain to a jury, can be hugely time-consuming. And we've set up Division of Protective Services units that we've talked about quite a lot, but some of these cases, they're just so complex and so difficult. It's becoming a real capacity issue with us. Now, of course, what we need to do is leverage that technology the other way ourselves. So we've started to do some work around that as well. So, but thanks for your question.
Commissioner, I'm conscious that you need to go, but I just want to ask yourself and Helen before you go, 3 years, what would you hope will be different or better, or where do you want to bring the service over the 3-year lifespan of these priorities? What will it look like of an anonymous Wednesday?
Thanks. That's what you call a hospital pass, is it? I think the big thing for me is, if I was to pick one thing, would be that first touch. that there was something somebody said earlier, I think Mark might have quoted it, that the front desk is where access to justice ends. And I just went, ooh, I hadn't, even though I'd looked at all these documents, and I just thought that first touch, because so if there was a big change, and whether that be by influence, by training, by supervision, by just messages going out to me, if we could make a huge improvement in that, so that a person, and it doesn't have to be just at the front desk, it's about that first interaction with any guard, not just the regular, not just the community guard, but the plainclothes detective dealing with a youngster on the side of the street, somebody coming into the counter who might meet a Garda staff member. It's about that first touch. So I would love to see that being transformed.
And Commissioner?
Thanks, yeah, and obviously I would agree with Helen's view on all that, but I think the other ones that I would add to that are, and again, it's something we've been mentioned here loads of times today, is around the visibility. So for sure, and I've said this a few times before in different forms, but for sure Ireland is a safe country. All the statistics show us that, but the reality is some people don't feel safe. They absolutely don't feel safe. So it's our job in policing, not just to provide deterrence and to arrest people, but to also reassure people they should feel safe when they come into the city centre. So we've still lots of work to do around that, in my view. And the visibility, the high visibility beats, is only one element of that. But we need to do lots and lots around that. And the second thing, that certainly in 3 years, we have some really big projects that we're trying to do in our strategic plan, and also in the police and priorities. You will see we've talked about enabling the organisation, so helping particularly our frontline people, to make sure they've got everything they need to do their job properly, to do it efficiently. So we should be way more efficient. So we should deal with the public, give a far better service. So there's lots and lots of things that we're working on that will come to fruition, I think, by the end of that 3-year period. And I think it will really change fundamentally how we do a lot of our policing operations and the service that we provide. So there's certainly those, my own two, Helen's one, and even like Helen's one around that first contact. And it's, again, I spoke about this on the 1st of September when I took over. Like, we've already started work on that, and like some of this is actually some of the most basic things. And I know Mark spoke about going into the station. We've already started looking at how we deal with people when they come into stations, even how those public offices look. Do they feel welcoming? What are they like? So we've already even started some of that work already. But again, they're all really important, those three things to me. Thanks.
Thank you both, and thank you for your candour. Thanks, Maria. So I'm going to be short and sweet with the next part, but I suppose it's kind of what happens now. So we have the priorities, the Garda Síochána have the priorities. How do we approach that oversight? And I suppose for me, the story of performance, and for the organisation, it's not any one thing. I think arguably there's not one number or metric that's going to tell you about performance on its own. I mean, if you look at, numbers of crime goes down. If you're looking at an area like domestic abuse or drug-related intimidation, you actually want to see those numbers going up. You want to see more reporting. Also then, the numbers won't always tell you either about the quality of a service that's being delivered. Is it fair? Is it legal? Is it non-discriminatory? It also doesn't tell you sometimes a lot about the consistency. As people mentioned, walking into the station, does it depend what station I walk into? Does it depend what guard I happen to meet when I walk in that door? So I suppose we need to look at, and we do, look at measures that relate to quantity, but also the quality of the service and whether it is meeting the needs of people and needs of everyone that engages with the guards, not just victims, also suspects, offenders. There's also then performance, obviously, in relation to the Garda Síochána organisation itself, and we're interested in that insofar as it impacts on performance. So are the needs of the workforce being met in terms of, are they clear on what the policy is? Is there a policy there that tells them how the organisation wants to do things? The deployment, the culture, have they the equipment? Is their welfare being minded? All of those things impact on the service and the policing service, I suppose, that people get when they engage with the guards. So it's critical for us to look at that as well. Move it on. We also, I suppose, when we are doing this work, I'll go back to the diagram that Mark used earlier. I suppose we try to get as full a picture of the messiness that sometimes is policing and the messiness that is trying to assess performance. And we do that we talk to Garda management, we talk to the frontline guards, we look at the reports they have, we engage with associations. We also then obviously have expertise in-house that's been evolving and developing. We also look to academia. We're also aware then of the numbers that are there, the CSO, the crime stats. We look at other socio-political phenomena that are happening. But then I suppose the one probably most relevant for today is the fact that we do put a premium as well on lived experience. And that whole idea of my truth is where I stand. We don't make any mad claims for it. We're not saying it's scientific. We don't think that because we talk to one community group in Tralee that means it's like that all over the country. We take that information, we're careful with it, we treat it confidentially, but we do pull from it thematically. And it's somewhere in the middle of all of that we're able to arrive at a sense of assessment and bring those questions back. If I maybe give you an example of two I just picked out. So here are two things in the priorities and top of mind in terms of how we would go about assessing these. So an effective victim policy is in place. One approach would be to say, is it or isn't? It's a binary thing, tick a box, grand, let's move on. I suppose in our approach we would be saying, is it there? Is it compliant with the kind of obligations under human rights, under the Victims Directive? Is it clear? If I was a guard in the front line, would I get what this is asking me to do? Or is it a telephone book that I am unlikely to reach for? Then are the services resourced? We might hear, this is the resourcing that's happening. We will go around the country, we'll meet with DPSUs, we'll meet with the victim services offices, but then we'll also then go out and meet with victims organisations and we'll ask them, okay, what's your experience of the service that the people you work with are experiencing? So it's in that kind of combination of looking at, I suppose, what officialdom is saying, what the documents are saying, what the frontline guards are saying, what the guards and the DPSUs are saying, and what the people experiencing the service are saying to us. It's pulling all of that together that helps us then to take an assessment. The other one, on the face of it, doesn't seem a very sexy measure. It's about policy design processes, but actually it's really critical. I mean, the amount of policies that the Garda Síochána have, I think it's well over 1,000. If you're a guard in the organisation, or you could be a policy owner in the organisation, you have a bouquet of policies under your remit. Getting those policies updated, getting them revised, getting them in a position that they can be responsive to things that are changing in the policing environment, knowing that those policies have meaningful human rights input and input in a way that makes it easy for a guard on the front line to understand what does that mean for me. Looking at how that runs through the organisation, the effectiveness of the decision making, who's at the table when the decisions are made, when are they at the table, are they coming in too late to the decision making? So again, on the face of it, doesn't look like the most exciting of measures, but in terms of potentially impact for guards and impact for members of the public in terms of the service they receive, it can be quite important. And so there, again, we would talk to head office, we would also go out and talk to guards about their experience of it as well. Is it clear to you? Do you know what the organisation is articulating and saying you should do? So I suppose that's just to give you a sense of there isn't any one source that we go to say this is the source of truth. There's many different perspectives, there's many different facts, stats, research, academia, people's experience, all of that is pulled on to try and do the best we can to assess how are they doing against the policing priorities. And I suppose in terms of yourselves as members of the public holding us to account, we publish as much as we can, we provide our minutes, they're published as well, we provide our reports, and as much as possible, even through the public meetings, we try to do our business as openly and transparently as we can. And I suppose our ethos of dealing with yourselves as well, we know your time is valuable. And I remember being at a conference once on consulting with children, and the woman came in and she asked us all a big question, and we all wrote down our bits on pieces of paper, and then she gathered our piece of paper in this bucket, and then she put the bucket over in the corner, and then she came back and she continued, and we're all sitting there going, what's happening with my piece of wisdom that I put in the bucket? And she turned around and she said, that's what consultation feels like sometimes. you put in the time, you put in the effort, and it's over there, and an organisation can feel good about itself going, weren't we great now? We went out and talked to the people, look at us. But I suppose days like today is our effort to try and show that the ethos is to close the loop, and the ethos is to come back and say, look, you said this, we mightn't have been able to sort all of it, but here's what we did with what you said, here's where it is now, and here's what we're going to do next. And you will be able to hold us to account, I suppose, over the next few years as to whether we've held the Guards appropriately to account for delivering on the policing priorities. But again, thank you. We can't do that unless there's the meaningful engagement with candour from yourselves. So that's my session. I hand over now to Elaine.
Thank you, everybody. So as we come to the close of today's event, my job really is to thank everybody who participated today, and also to thank everybody who has contributed as we go on this journey. And I see so many stakeholders here, and civil society and authority members, and of course serving members of An Garda Síochána. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the Chair of the Garda Board, Donald de Butler, who is on this oversight journey as we're trying to figure out what our structures do and how we relate to one another. So we heard this afternoon about the priorities that will guide policing over the coming years, and we've heard about the expectations that communities have of policing and the challenges facing those who deliver policing services, and indeed the opportunities that exist to strengthen public confidence and provide outcomes. And for us in the Policing Community Safety Authority, this marks a beginning of a new phase of work. Our role is not simply to establish the priorities, but to ensure that they are translated into action, to assess the progress of them, and to provide independent assurance to the public regarding performance and outcomes. So I guess it's a reassurance that all of this lovely words on paper and graphics is not a full stop. It is a beginning very much for us. And I'd also like to acknowledge that, as Margaret outlined, the difficult decisions have to be made every day, and the Commissioner alluded to that about the challenges in Wexford. It's nice to see Liam. We had a lovely engagement with him in Wexford a couple of months ago. There are difficult decisions that have to be made regarding whether it's where to put police officers, what to prioritise on. And our job also is not just to set priorities, but to understand the context in which those decisions have to be made. And it's a context that changes all the time. I look back to in November of 2023 when we were going on our merry way looking at authority meetings, and suddenly out of nowhere the context of our engagement with An Garda Síochána changed with those awful days in Dublin with the riots, and then our focus on public order. So things change and evolve, and we have to change and evolve with that. And we must be prepared to challenge when improvement is needed, but we have to, as has been echoed by the authority executive here today, we have to also understand the operational realities faced by those who provide policing services on behalf of the public. And a nod, I think, to Margaret's uncle there, that we're not oblivious to the difficulties that the Guards face every day. And she'll kill me for saying this. I hope she's not looking online. No, she's not. But my sister, who's a Guard, will absolutely take me to task if I get ahead of myself about what I think the Guards should be doing, because it is often a very different thing about what it is that they face on an everyday basis. And I think it was striking when the Commissioner referred to the difference between some of the priorities around what the public wanted and then what the serving and retired members of An Garda Síochána focused on, which was on roads policing. And I wonder, is that because it is members of An Garda Síochána who are going to the front line and experiencing firsthand what the reality of the consequences of roads policing looks like. And so I thought that's a very good reminder for us as an organisation that what the priorities and what the public may want. You know, there are other realities that we also have to consider. So and that, I guess, is to echo what has been said about that priority, about enabling the front line and why that's so important. And communities are best served when Garda personnel are supported, equipped and enabled to perform at their best, as the Minister has outlined. And the publication of these priorities now marks the beginning of a new cycle of public accountability, and that work begins immediately. In fact, on Thursday, we have our next public meeting with the Garda Commissioner and senior Garda leadership. And these meetings are a visual expression of the accountability framework established under the Act. I don't think there is any other body in the state that is subject to meetings every month. We give them a break in August, where and you know, most of them are live streamed, and we ask questions on behalf of the public in public. And when those we also publish meetings every month, whether those meetings are public or private, and a link to those meetings are available on YouTube. And they provide an opportunity for the authority to examine performance openly and transparently, and for the public to see oversight and action. And I was smiling there when I was listening to the Commissioner talking about how going down to these meetings were not always an easy experience. They're not easy for us either. But I was heartened about his description of us in terms of maturity of relationship, and the Minister did echo back to events of 10 years ago when policing was very much in the public eye all the time. And you know, I think that the things are different now, touch wood. But I think the job of an authority like ourselves is to be a critical friend. And I remember when I got this job, I asked my predecessor, Bob Collins, did he have a job description? And he laughed at me. And a lot of it is, and it's a very Irish thing, which is about relationships and about how we speak to one another and the tone and knowing when to be that friend. And the authority being an avenue to explain to the public about difficult things that are happening in policing, whether it is about the riots that are occurring around the country on various incidents, or whether it's been critical. And I'll let you all in a little secret. Usually that's done in private. So we usually do our giving out in private, but we're not afraid to do it in public either. I hope many of you will continue to engage with the authorities' work in the months and years ahead. And just to finish off, I want to say it's very fitting that we're here in Wood Quay. It's a place deeply connected to Dublin's civic history, and this is an absolute expression of civic society here today. For generations, it's been a place of where questions of public interest have been debated and where institutions have been challenged to respond to public concerns, and where the relationship between citizens and public bodies have evolved over time. But it also reminds us that while institutions change, their legitimacy ultimately depends on the confidence of the people that they serve. And strong public institutions are built not only on authority, but through listening, engagement, accountability, and trust. And that's essentially what we are as an authority, and that's what our remit is to do, to be that critical friend. So I'd like again to thank everybody for coming today on this very warm day, and to thank everybody for their contribution. And we look forward to working together to ensure that these priorities will translate into real measurable improvements in policing and community safety for the people of Ireland. So thank you very much.